Welcome to a community built of tomorrow's business leaders. Hey guys, I'm William Freitas, and this is the Socius podcast. Socius, welcome back to another episode. Today we've got Alex Solo. We're super excited to have Alex Solo on the show. Alex is from SprintLaw, and a little bit of a snippet on Alex. Alex has gone from a business of 2 to rapidly growing in 4 years to a business of 35. Recently named, I think it was an award, Fast 500 by Deloitte in Asia Pac, number 146, something like 380% growth. Alex, welcome to the show, mate. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Will. It's good to be here.
Yeah, honestly, it's exciting to have you because there's so much that we can dive into. But as always, we want to start off the show by giving a little bit of a snippet on you. This podcast is a little bit different. We want to understand what makes you tick, why you started SprintLaw. So give us a little bit of an insight into that journey from day one. What had you and Tomo, your business partner, start the journey, and what's led you to be to where you are now?
For sure. So we started the business in 2017. So yeah, about 4 years ago. My co-founder Tomo and I met at Clayton Utz, which is one of the sort of big corporate law firms in Australia. And the genesis for SprintLaw was sort of our experiences working in sort of a traditional law firm environment. Both of us, graduated from law, but both had a bit of a background in tech as well. I think my co-founder Tomo worked a little bit in legal tech when he was at university, which is an industry that's in some senses quite a young sort of industry. He got in pretty early, started at the beginning of his university degree, and got to know a lot about what was happening with technology and law and how they were being combined. And my story before then was sort of I was studying law at uni, but I also started a small sort of web design app development company when I was at university. So I also had a little bit of a tech background, which I did, sort of ran that for a little bit and did it a little bit after university. So both of us sort of met at Clayton Utz, working in a very traditional environment, but both having a little bit of background in tech, and became pretty quick friends, talking about how, all the different ways that law could be done better, could be done more efficiently using technology. Back when we sort of started, there was a lot of people talking about it, so it was kind of an exciting time. Yeah.
And when you say web app development, that sort of business that you did initially,
Yeah.
Is that because you've got a background in development? I mean, you went to uni and did law, I presume, law and media. I think
Yeah, I did law and media. Didn't know how to code from university or anything. I sort of taught myself. I mean, I've always been a bit of a IT nerd, so when I was growing up, I made websites and stuff, and then when I was at uni, sort of just with a friend of mine, just started this company selling websites, and we didn't really know how to make them, and then sold a few, had to work out how to make them to deliver it to the client. So I learned a little bit of coding, but did a lot of outsourcing and stuff like that, and then ended up doing tech stuff that way. Yeah.
So both yourself and Tomo sort of crossed paths at some point. And who came up with the idea to sort of use your tech background and his legal background? Obviously you had a legal background too, but to formulate SprintLaw, who came up with the idea?
Well, the two of us were just bouncing around with a million different business ideas from the moment that we kind of met. And SprintLaw was probably the evolution of like 6 other versions of what we might do. We just had so many ideas. We had a baby business called LawFi, which is in retrospect a terrible name, but it was very, very trendy back in 2012 or whenever we were talking about it, which was like a marketplace for lawyers and stuff. So we were kicking around ideas. I don't remember. I think, the reality is probably what the business model became was just a collaboration between our different ideas. Tomo came up with the name SprintLaw. He's quite good with naming things, so he one day had a whole list of different business names that he brought into work and was like, hey, I think this is the one. But yeah, it was a collaborative process. We did some stuff at Clayton when we were there. We launched like a startup practice within Clayton Utz, which was just realizing there are a whole bunch of startups and small businesses in Australia that Clayton Utz wasn't servicing. Some of them we thought could be the next big thing, could be the next Facebook or whatever, and sort of thought, well, if we get in there early, give them some free advice, maybe they'll become Clayton Utz clients in the longer term, and that got us into the startup scene.
This is really interesting. So what you're saying is effectively Clayton Utes weren't servicing the SME market. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, they're really designed for the top end of town type businesses,
Okay.
and that makes sense for what they do. But there are increasingly these, software tech companies that scale really quick and start off not in that target market, but quickly end up in that target market. And so, we saw that sort of emerging and pitched to the partners or some of the partners this idea of building a practice within that firm that just service startups, really as like a marketing and promotional thing for the firm, and kind of because we just thought it was pretty cool and wanted to go out and work with those companies. But yeah, they weren't really targeting it, but like the idea that we had at that time that it might be smart for them to go in early. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, so SprintLaw now today, how would you, I guess, describe it? It specifically targets SME business. What sort of market does it service?
Yeah. So, when we launched in 2017, I think what we'd realized around that time was that there's in Australia like two buckets of small businesses that, or at least I like to think of it in two buckets. You've got your startup companies, or maybe we can think of them more as like tech startup or growth startup companies who are tiny now but have ambitions to be massive. And then you have sort of traditional SME businesses who are currently small and don't necessarily have grand ambitions to grow.
Yeah.
Both of those markets we saw through our experiences at Clayton Utes were very underserviced by legal providers. There was a study done in I think 2015 or 16 that said in Australia something like 70 to 75% of those businesses weren't seeing a lawyer when they had a legal problem, weren't consulting lawyers, and the reasons were that lawyers were too expensive, too time consuming, not accessible, and these sorts of things. And industry customer experience was really low. So our business is really designed for those two buckets of businesses, growth companies and then SMEs. And our offering is really targeted around designing something that utilizes tech that can really solve that problem for them.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I see it quite a bit where businesses, I guess, achieve a lot of growth, and then once they've got that growth, they kind of sort of forget where they've come from, and completely forget about, I guess, servicing that SME market. That's part of the reason why we initially came into business as well. Very similar, I guess, ethos is being able to service the SME clients really well, because I seriously believe that Australian businesses need to have the right legal advice. Doesn't matter what size you are, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a perfect little niche that you guys have found. And what is it specifically that you've done differently to the rest of the market? Because sure, you could just set up another law firm and provide some advice and provide some cheaper advice, but what is it specifically that you came up with?
So I think it was recognizing, looking at the problem that is what we started with. Why are these people not consuming? I mean, it's cost, complexity, and the fact that basically acquiring legal services was not an easy thing to understand how to do. So for us, we were thinking, how can we bring down cost and simplify this whole process? And the solution that ended up working was basically productizing our services and turning what's traditionally like a service model, which is charged by the hour, into sort of a packaged productized model. What the idea was basically that we're going to look for patterns in what small businesses need. Every time we see a pattern, we're going to try and put it into a fixed fee package. So everyone needs a company set up, everyone needs a shareholders agreement, everyone needs a trademark. Over time, we found that there are more patterns in more niche areas. Every graphic designer needs terms and conditions. Every recruiter needs a recruitment terms and conditions. So designing packages for all these different situations at a fixed price in a way that's simple, easy to understand, price transparent. And then once you've packaged the services, so for example, we have a shareholders agreement package, which costs something like $1,500 plus GST, and includes what people want, which is a document, a little bit of time with a lawyer, and some changes. Once you've productized the service, your business model becomes about how can I make sure that I've got high quality products delivered efficiently. And so for that's where the tech kind of comes in our business. So looking at ways to automate as much of the package delivery process as possible while not sacrificing on quality. And that's kind of the model that we've come up with. Basically, these package legal services, of which we got about 250 of them now, that we're delivering to the small businesses in a way that's like easy to buy, easy to understand, a lot cheaper than traditional providers, and a lot higher quality as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I hear in that too is it's also about simplifying the buying process, because as you rightfully pointed out, it's not accessible, one, because of cost, but two, small businesses don't understand when the right time is to speak to I guess, a law firm in that case.
Yeah.
So it's not as accessible. So simplifying that buying process is definitely what I hear in that, because, the bigger law firms are probably that a little bit more difficult to approach. So that makes complete sense. Would you say there were any challenges that you found in your model that came up throughout that process in, I guess, those first 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, a whole bunch of challenges. Specifically, challenges with the model would just be stuff like, in the early stages, we thought we could make this a completely self-service business where we would just provide packaged documents. And in fact, the first version of the website we set up had, I think, 100 questionnaires for different types of documents. Spent ages building that, launched it online, rolled it out to people, and then by question 4 on each of the forms, everyone was just dropping off. It was too boring. So quickly realizing that we needed a model that included human beings. That's what the market wanted. I think that was a big learning for us, and it re-evaluated kind of how we did things. Certain areas of law are very difficult to productize. And we've learned to focus on, at least in the early stages of our growth, the areas that are easier to productize. But we had some, financial regulatory law is very complicated, for example, and we've had some challenges trying to productize that stuff. So those would be probably the challenges with the model. I mean, there's been all kinds of operational business challenges as well. Yeah.
And I guess what I hear in that is constantly refining what your service offering is, probably similar to what yourself and Tomo did, sort of refining business ideas and elaborating to where you are now is probably what made you be so successful. Talk to me a little bit about, I guess, the setup with the team. From what I understand, you guys work remotely as well. How is that set up? Because that's obviously very different to how other law firms would traditionally operate.
Yeah, so we've got a completely distributed workforce, a virtual workforce, or whatever you want to call it. We didn't start out like that from day one. We started out from day one saying that, we are office agnostic. You can come in if you want. There's always going to be a space here if you want to come in, but you can also work from home, and all of our systems were designed to support flexible work. As we kind of grew, we grew probably quicker than our office space was able to keep up, but found that the systems we designed were good enough to kind of handle things remotely. And then sort of particularly COVID coming in and forcing everyone to go remote, we were kind of set up for it already, and our team grew a lot in the last 12 to 14 months, but our office space didn't grow at all. So we've kind of ended up being a completely distributed workforce. So it's definitely an interesting experience. There's a lot of challenges, running a business that way. But there's a lot of benefits as well, and I think we're kind of still navigating how to do it. But I think we got some pretty good things set up that make it work quite well.
Yeah, obviously COVID-19 sort of forced a lot of people to go into working remotely, but this is obviously a model which you adapted from day one, right?
Yes.
Which made you very different to the other traditional law firms and other traditional companies, really. I suspect you would have done well throughout COVID. What was that experience like for you guys, having already set up efficiently to work from home or work remotely, wherever you choose to be? What was your experience throughout COVID?
Operationally, it wasn't too bad, like definitely compared to our clients and other businesses. I think, as you say, we were just set up for it already, and the systems worked. We didn't have to change stuff. That was all good. I think, like every other business, helping staff navigate through what was a pretty tumultuous time in the world, uncertainty as to the future, I think, and you would know this, sort of running a business when, the world appears to be collapsing around you is definitely stressful, and just the uncertainty around that and everyone sort of feeling a bit stressed was definitely the biggest challenge. And then dealing with that remotely while the team's growing, I think that was quite hard for us, but it forced us to really focus on, our systems and processes around staff well-being and collaboration and culture, and we've ended up, I think, with a much better virtual workforce at the end of, not to say COVID's over, but at least as the economy's opened up a little bit more, it's led to an improvement in our virtual systems. Yeah,
this is an interesting point, particularly when we talk about remote working. I've got a pretty strong opinion on what remote working looks like, and I guess what that might have as an impact for culture particularly. So I want to know what you guys have done to make sure culture, I guess, still thrives and maintains alive amongst the 35 people. And no doubt as you continue to grow, it'll be even harder to manage. But, I'm a big believer that, my team is fully in the office now
Right.
because, we love that interaction. We love engaging with each other. And we've found too, working with other companies who aren't necessarily all in the office, their response times aren't as great.
Yeah.
So what are some of and I don't know if that's a cultural thing or I don't know if that's an operational modeling thing. But from a culture perspective, what have you done to make sure that, SprintLaw continues to be a great place to work and a great place for people to deal with as well?
Yeah, I think all the concerns you just raised about remote work are valid, and anyone who claims that it's just easier and better than being in the office together I just find that hard to believe. I think you really, really have to think about it. It's just not a matter of turning on Zoom in all of your meetings and just hoping it'll all work out. That said, yeah, it really goes core to operations and how you run the business. A few things that we've done, I think, that make it really successful, with a little asterisk because it's still all early days in the scheme of the life of our business. But what's working well now is probably, I'd say, two to three key features of the model. The first is the way that we track KPIs and performance. It's pretty much completely output based. It's not time based. We don't have the concept of FaceTime, obviously, because there's no office. So how are you going to get people working? How are you going to measure performance? You got to think about each of the roles in the business and set clear KPIs and targets for what success looks like. And then you have to be able to measure those and then say, well, if people aren't hitting these numbers, this indicates they're not performing well. If people are hitting these numbers, they're doing a great job. For example, for our lawyers, we set a number of targets, output targets, based on the hours that they work. Some work part-time, some work full-time. We set NPS targets, so quality targets. We set knowledge targets. They've got to contribute back to the IP of the business. If we have staff that are consistently smashing all three virtually, I don't really care whether they work 10 hours a week or 40 hours a week or whatever it is. As long as those numbers are being hit, works for the business and works for us. And that's something that people really like because they're in control of how they work. They know what the goals are. They understand how it fits into the business. And they understand that the distributed work gives them the flexibility to do that. So I think that's been very important. Probably the other thing that's been important has been facilitating regular virtual collaboration and not throwing away in-person events entirely. So, we have probably more daily team and weekly team get-togethers than you would in an in-person office. Every single day, every team will hop on a call and see each other's faces, and we'll have a bit of a chat and we feel like a team.
Yeah.
We've shipped the whole company into teams of no more than 5 or 6, which is something we got from a company called Zapier, who are a well-known sort of remote workforce. And they basically said, as soon as you have more than like 8 people on a Zoom call, the culture goes. It's just a boring big meeting. So build your company into smaller teams. And then still investing in, regular, couple of times a quarter, we have company events. And if we have people interstate, we're flying them out all to get together in person. And the money we've saved on rent can kind of go to that stuff as well. Interesting.
I mean, there are a few things in that I'd love to touch on, particularly in the legal space. I think it's so different to be outcome-based versus time-based. So you're telling me there are no timesheets?
Well, no, I won't tell you there are no timesheets. We tried that for a little bit. We still have people record time, but it's not a KPI or a metric. It's actually just something we use to measure profitability of the business. So I want to know if we're doing shareholders agreements, I want to know how long it's taking people on average because that will help me work out the profitability. But the timesheets are not a performance measure or anything else, and they're not timesheets in the sense that they go to the client and so on. So
you're not effectively ranking everyone on hours put, because I've heard bigger firms having done that in the past, sort of, and to this day actually, how many hours you're doing a month measured against what your team has done. And I think a couple of the guys that we've spoken to in the past have done something like 280 hours billed in a month. That's honestly probably more than the hours I've been awake.
Yes.
Like, it's just unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
So I can appreciate that you might need to manage time, but I think output based is definitely a huge thing. How do you segment your team down to 5? So,
most of our teams, most of our teams, we've got, 5 or 6 teams are just by nature probably less than 5 people. But our legal team is the one that would be bigger than that. And it used to be one big group of people. But yeah, we had the issue, particularly with the virtual workforce, where we just had too many lawyers in a meeting. and all of them are not really
Too many opinions?
too many opinions. Yeah, I mean, you don't. Probably for lawyers, you probably want less than 5 at a meeting. No. But so we ship. I mean, we've divided our team into the red team and the blue team and the green team. So we've just color coded them, and they kind of focus on different areas of law. And as we grow, we'll just keep shipping people. Every 5 hires, we're scheduled to hire a team leader, and it'll just grow in teams of 5. So I think that's just how we'll do it, and it works well with that little group. You're recreating. As you would know, in the early stages of a company, there's a great vibe when there's a small group of people. And as it grows, you can lose that. But if you can divide your team into those smaller groups, you can keep that vibe, still happening. And I think it's good. Like, too many people at one team level, I think, particularly virtual, but even without virtual, is a recipe for sort of interpersonal problems and probably inefficiency.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is there sort of like friendly competition in between the red team, the green team? Yeah, there is.
Yeah, a little bit of friendly competition. I mean, we don't do individual. We do individual output targets, so KPIs.
Yeah.
But we do a lot of our overall business goals are done on a team level. So the blue team has targets, the green team has targets, then they have a combined target together. So they're incentivized a little bit to compete because competition does drive good performance, but also not to the point where they don't help each other out because they've got a combined target as well.
I think that makes complete sense. And I think particularly in traditional law firms, it's more so individual KPI based. And that's why it's such a dog-eat-dog world. And I'm a big believer in team, I guess, results or to team goals, team-oriented goals, to make sure that every individual is working towards the same outcome, which I think is fantastic. You mentioned NPS, and I guess for the benefit of the audience, that's Net Promoter Score. So you're getting feedback from all of your clients after every piece of activity or output done. Is that how you operate?
Yeah, we use an NPS software tool called Delighted, which I understand there's a bit of an art to when you ask the NPS questions. So how would you rate this service? Would you recommend it to someone or whatever the question is? It gets asked at random times throughout the client's journey. Either after they've done the service with us or during the service that they're doing with us or at the beginning. It's quite good to be able to track, the client and what score they gave us. And we have a policy that if someone gives us less than, I think, an 8, they get a phone call. And we are trying to figure out why was this less than an 8, which is a pretty high standard. But given that our industry's got a bad reputation for customer experience, and it's one of our big points of difference, it's been pretty important. We've ended up with a really, really high NPS. It's like last quarter it was 94 or something, and our average I think is about 90, which is
Nice.
pretty stupidly high. But it's one of the main things that we just prioritize across the business. We're like, there's no reason for a client not to have their mind blown when they use us. Like, what we're here to do is blow their brains off with how good we are. Yeah.
And that's a good reason to ensure that the quality remains, because it's so easy to grow and lose. I mean, it's actually so hard to scale and maintain quality. And I think that's a huge aspect of regularly getting feedback, focusing on the client's journey. Tell me a little bit about the client's journey. Obviously, legal work can be quite transactional. Oh, okay, I'm about to enter a business with another shareholder. I need a shareholder's agreement. I'm about to enter a new premises. I need you to review my lease, whatever it might be. I'm purchasing a business, whatever it might be. Talk to us about that journey and how you make things different to ensure that journey is even better so they get better experiences.
Yeah, good question. I think we have kind of modeled the customer journey off, and you touched on this before, like the delivery experience, making it easy is a big part of the model. We've modeled it off e-commerce stores, really, like not completely, but like in the same way you will order a t-shirt on an e-commerce site, you add it to your shopping cart, you pay for it, you get an estimated shipping date, and then you get told when it's been shipped and you get told when it's going to arrive. That's probably a high-level model for our process. People will inquire through the website. We don't have an e-commerce shopping store because it's a bit hard to do that for legal, but we give them the products that they might need. They get a proposal that they can accept and pay online. We make them pay up front 100% of the time. Once they've paid, they lock in their delivery time. They can pay more for urgent delivery, so fast turnarounds. They get told your allocated lawyer is X, your delivery time is Y, and then they can click to book in a call with the lawyer that they've been allocated to. So it's a very streamlined, familiar delivery process to most of our clients. When it gets to the part of the actual legal advice, we're not where we use tech, automation, and process to make things efficient, but that's not visible to the customer. It's very important that the customer, the focus on our consultations is for the customer to feel like they've understood their legal requirements. We understand their business, and the advice we're giving is tailored to what they're doing. So systems and processes must support that. They can't be, we're going to treat every case the same. They have to be, we can handle every case that there is, and we have different processes or flexible processes to support that. So the customer experience on the call is going to be very consultative. We're going to listen to them, understand their business, understand their requirements, and then we'll usually, often what we do is deliver, like, let's say a shareholders agreement, deliver a first cut of the document after the call. There's usually a second call to walk them through it, and then they get a reasonable period to ask for any adjustments, and then the project's kind of closed. So that's the general flow of a journey. E-commerce based with a very human element in the delivery phase.
Interesting. And how much time do you spend with your staff around sort of training them throughout that journey? Obviously you can drop any, commercial lawyer in there and they can run with it, or they may not know your process and you might need to teach them around process. But in addition to that, there's, servicing a client and making them feel like they're being serviced by SprintLaw and the SprintLaw way. What sort of training do you do in that respect?
So much of the legal delivery process is the non-human stuff, and particularly when you've turned your business into a productized business, and you've instead of looking at it as like a human being relationship, where like, okay, there's ordering, there's sales, there's delivery, there's automated emails, and there's payment, and blah blah blah. So to some extent, the human being is one element in the chain of our delivery thing. So if there's some variance there, the customer experience is still very SprintLaw from beginning to end. So already in the way that we've created the business, we've eliminated the individual variance risk, if you would call it that. For the lawyers themselves, we've got a couple of systems that we've set up just around how we hire, resource our legal team. We have lawyers. We have basically 5 levels of lawyers: level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is kind of linked to their levels of experience. We have pay parity at every level, so everyone gets paid the same. To tackle some of those pay issues that you get. And then for each level, we have different kind of requirements for what's involved in their role. So if you're a graduate, it's very clear what you do on a particular package. There are certain types of packages that pretty quickly you should be able to do yourself, like a simple website terms and conditions. For other packages, your role is to provide a supporting role to a senior lawyer, level 3 or 4, that you're paired with. So they get quite clear instructions in kind of what they are going to do.
Right.
In terms of and then similar for the other levels. And then in terms of the training, and we did a bunch of research into like training theory and education and spoke to people around how we should do it. And crudely, I think one of the big things that we're doing a little bit differently that works quite well for this is recognizing that kind of difference between knowledge-based training and skills-based training. So, in the early days of training, we just had lecture series where we bored all of our staff to death with, this is how SprintLaw works, this is what you do. And workshops, right, which everyone forgets or zones out in. These days, it's all about skills. So if you start at SprintLaw as a graduate, actually your training is like 1 or 2 workshops, but most of it is, here's 6 example jobs, deliver them and get feedback. And we give them fake client scenarios that are based off real scenarios. So most of the training is very practical and the feedback's consistent. We got consistent competency frameworks for measuring people's performance, and it ends up that you end up with a level of consistency in the work that's done, while not, I think, losing, as you rightly put it, the variance and the human element that you want. You want some difference between each SprintLaw lawyer. They're human beings. They're not just robots.
But what I like about that is that there's a layered approach to, okay, these are the skills you need to demonstrate to be at this level. And then if you want to take your career to the next level, then here's another layer of skills that you need to develop, and here are some training that we can give you. I think too often we see business sort of saying, okay, bring somebody in, okay, you're going to be here for a year and a half, and then in a year and a half, that is when you're going to be, looking to take that next level. There's no real clear structure around, okay, these are the skills you need to demonstrate. I need you to be able to do this and this to achieve some career progression. I think that's what I like about it. Often in traditional law firms, you're a paralegal for X period of time, and to be an associate, you need to work so many hours.
Exactly. I think you're right, and I think that was one of the things we were trying to trying to solve for. Like, is that, oh, this is unfair. Why did this person get promoted? Why does this person get paid more? I'm better. It's like, well, what is better? Let's define better. Let's put a criteria around it, put a tracker around it, measure it. And if people are wondering why they're not moving up a level, it's right here. We're telling you once a quarter, here's how you're tracking. Yeah.
Interesting. No, I like that. Let's take it to, I guess, how clients approach and engage you particularly, purely because I've seen a few law firms having done this in the past, and we're seeing a lot more of I guess, the structure being around subscription model pricing, particularly because, it might be some law firms want to charge $5,000 for a shareholders agreement. And they want to spread that cost over for a year, and so they make it a monthly recurring payment. And also, I guess there is some value in having a subscription model. Like down the track, if someone wants to buy your business, you're like, okay, well, here are 100, 200, whatever it is, clients paying X amount of dollars per month, and this is what our value is. What does SprintLaw do in that aspect? Do you do anything differently, or are you the transactional, one contract is this price, the other contract is that price? What do you guys do on that front?
Excellent question, and definitely something we've thought about like through the whole journey of the business. I think there's this competing two competing priorities. One is like, what is a good business model? Well, a great business model is that you're a pure subscription business with certain revenue, which is beautiful and will last forever, and you can go to bed every night knowing money will be the same next week unless your business explodes. That's a great business. But then there's product market fit. Like, what do your customers actually want? And we've built the business, iterated the business around our market and what we think they need. And for the smaller companies we work with, we've toyed with subscriptions from time to time. The fundamental reality is we think that like smaller companies in our target market need to use lawyers on average three to four times a year. Some will need them more in a particular year, some less, but that's kind of what you're looking at. So having a subscription in that context doesn't really make sense if it's a all-you-can-eat subscription. All your legals are covered by this subscription fee. They're going to feel like they're not getting value because they're not going to be using it. What we do think people need lawyers for a lot are just quick questions. And we were getting that a lot. I mean, we started off as a pure transaction business. We just sell packages, but then we were having people in between packages going, hey, just got a quick question about the document you did. Hey, I just want to know this really quick thing. Is this an issue or am I fine? So this melded out what our subscription offering is. So we do have one. It's called the SprintLaw membership. And the way that we've designed it is that people get unlimited free phone calls if they're on it, so free quick questions, and then they'll get discounts, 15% discounts on any return work that they do with us. So, the advantage for someone to sign up would be, well, I could use SprintLaw one-off, or I could sign up to the membership, and what I'm going to get is 15% off this job and all the future jobs that I do with them. It's not going to cost that much. It's, I think, around $600 to $700 a year at the moment, and I'm going to have someone I can call whenever, like my lawyers that I can call whenever I have a quick question. Yep. And so we rolled that out about a year ago, and it's been wildly successful. Like, most of our customers are signing up to it. A lot of them are coming back, so we generate pseudo-recurring revenue. It's not locked in, but it's from returning clients. And it just is a really good fit for what the market needs. So, yeah.
And what does it look like, say, 12 months down the track? Do you look at renewing them? Do you sort of assess how many times they've called? Are they getting value? Are they not getting value? Talk to us a little bit about that.
For sure. I mean, we have them on email subscriptions, reminding them that it's available, encouraging them to use it a little bit. At the end of the year, we're only coming up just past the first set of renewals. So we'll see what our churn rate is, but we haven't had anyone churn yet, which is good. But when we, as part of demonstrating the value for the renewals, it's going to be around, here's how much money you saved because you were a member. For a lot of them, it's going to be a significant amount of money. It's going to outweigh the amount that they spend on the membership.
So you track, okay, we've given you a 15% discount on this, and this contract.
Yes.
You've saved this much money.
Exactly.
Yep.
And if that number is above the membership fee, then it's paid for itself, right? And it almost always is. And for those that isn't, it is still, you've used this many calls. And for some, it's just peace of mind. Like, it's not very expensive fee to have a firm you can say are your lawyers that if something happens, you can click a button to book it in.
That's the biggest issue that I think, we see in particularly Australian small business. Many people won't get on the phone to their, accountant being one of them, but also lawyers particularly, because they won't want to be charged for the 6-minute increment that they're on that phone call.
Exactly.
You know, 6 minutes goes in, hey, how was your weekend? I went to Mudgee and was doing camping. Like, okay, great. Charge me whatever a $6 increment is.
Yeah.
And then you want to get them to give you the advice, and then they're going to do some research, and that's going to be a whole nother 3 hours. That's going to cost you $1,000. I think that's the real fear for Australian small businesses.
Yeah.
And I think that solves it, really. It's like, hey, for a small price to pay, you're going to get free access to a lawyer. And you're saying no more than 30 minutes?
No more than 30 minutes. We're pretty flexible.
30 minutes.
It's plenty of
You
time.
can get a lot done in 30 minutes. A lot of guidance in 30 minutes. And two, I mean, great for Australian small business, but great for your business too, where I think that's a great opportunity to identify gaps within that business to say, hey, like, you actually don't have a efficient employment agreement. You know, have you thought of updating this employment agreement? Or what about your subcontractors agreement? You know, things like that. I think it's a great like cross-selling opportunity as well. I know that sounds advantageous, but it's a great advantage for Australian small businesses. Don't get me wrong on that.
Yeah, it's both, right? Like, yeah, increases our upselling, increases our return business, and also, you know, because when people find us, it's often event-based. They've got all kinds of things wrong with their business that are important, and if we just work on the one package, we're not going to figure them out. So it's good for their risk management. Like, we're only going to be upselling if they need it, and I think that kind of helps both parties. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've launched not recently, as you're aware, and on the first episode we actually had Michael Buggy on the show.
Yeah.
And you'll hear that one shortly, but he specifically spoke about how very little percentage of law firms are advertising on Google, which I found incredibly interesting. And this is something obviously you guys are pushing into quite heavily. Give us a little bit of a background in your experience in, I guess, SEM, or what is search engine marketing, and SEO, search engine optimization. Tell us a little bit about what you do there, what you think is different, and why you think it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, most of our business comes from digital marketing. I'd say 90%, maybe 85% of new business is coming through digital marketing. And for us, digital marketing is two main channels. One is Google Ads, so paid Google you know, search advertisements, and the other one is sort of what you would say SEO, or just, you know, we write articles on our website, and we rank high on Google, so people will just sort of click on those articles and then find us and inquire. So that's the main source of business for us. I think it's running a business with a customer acquisition model built on digital marketing is very different, in fact, to running a business not built on that. And in a sense, the way we've had to build the business has really been informed by our experience doing digital marketing. It's the channel we picked at the beginning. We said, we're online. This is the channel that makes sense to find customers. We think there's a big opportunity here because, you know, as Buggy said, heaps of law firms weren't investing in it. They don't get it. And it's quite techy these days, so it actually requires a bit of technical skill to work out. So we knew it was an opportunity, but the reality of using those channels is that you know, Google ads are expensive. They go up over time, really, as competition increases. And you get a hell of a lot of leads, a lot of inquiries that come through them, not all of which are high quality, versus, you know, more traditional referral routes or whatever. You may get a lower volume of leads, but they're going to usually be high quality. They'll come with a personal recommendation from who referred you, and they'll convert. So the sales time required to invest in digital marketing is a lot higher. We basically need to have a dedicated sales team who respond to all of our leads. Right. And we're converting, you know, a small percentage of them into clients, like 10 to 20%, somewhere in that range. So that means for every one client, there's, you know, 5 to 9 that we spoke to and didn't get across the line, either because they accidentally inquired, or they need a family lawyer, or they're really too small to sort of even have started things, or various reasons. But it's its own game. And the other aspect of it is, particularly with Google Ads. So I mean, with the Google Ad channel, there's a lot of investment up front in acquiring a client. Like, you know, we calculated it costs us around, let's say, $800 to $900 to acquire a new client. So if you're only making $1,000 to $1,200 off the first job, that's not much left in terms of profit. So you're really buying the client for long-term value, but you got to be able to cop a short-term loss, which some small businesses can't. And then similarly for the SEO side, we invested for probably a year in producing a hell of a lot of articles for our website. Google didn't recognize that we had great articles because no one was clicking on them. We shared them on social and promoted them a bit, but it took about a year until we started to see return on that investment, and again, you're
Yeah.
just paying people to write articles, but then suddenly it all skyrockets. So I would say digital marketing is short-term investment for long-term gain. If you can get through the trough of disillusionment where you're spending money into an endless pit,
Yeah.
you can really get a big return, but it is not straightforward.
And do you think it's going to be sustainable long term? Because obviously, as time progresses, more and more businesses are going to pump more money into Google and AdWords. Um, it's only going to get more expensive for you to advertise. I can just see that happening. You know, what might cost you $800 or $900 to acquire a client may cost you now $1,000 in a year's time, whatever it might be. Do you think longer term it's going to be sustainable? Or if it's not, are you going to rely on, I guess, the goodwill you've already built and the client base you've already built and leverage off that?
Yeah, I think the strategy for our business has always been like a lifetime value model, and we're lucky, fortunate, whatever you want to call it. Maybe it was planned, but where we're at a point where we have enough returning work in the business now, enough people on our memberships that the business is in a sense insulated to some degree from Google Ads risk. I mean, in 2017, maybe 80 to 90% of my revenue came from Google Ads,
Yep.
and that's slowly gotten down to now 15% of my revenue is coming from Google Ads.
Perfect.
So that's good, but still, at 15% is a decent portion. If we want to keep growing, we're going to be relying on it. And I think the strategy has always been like you start off. One digital marketer said to me, "Think of your Google Ads like McDonald's. Like you can eat it for a little bit, but if you build a business with that as your diet, it'll be very unhealthy. You need to diversify your diet of where you're eating from the digital marketing plate. So I think investing a lot more in our organic marketing, doing more of these articles and multimedia content and those sorts of things, and getting that brand awareness level out is going to mean that our reliance on paid channels that are expensive will shrink even further, and we're going to be getting more work just from being known as the small business firm. So that's the strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think any more than sort of 20, maximum 30% of where you're getting business from it becomes like a red flag within your business, right? If that source is turned off, or like you said, a Google AdWords risk, it's a key risk within someone's business, right? If that skyrockets, it no longer becomes sustainable to go into that space and get business from that space. So fantastic to see that you sort of diversified and reduced that percentage. Obviously, if anyone types in SprintLaw, they would have seen a couple of great ads out there that you've raised some funds and whatever it might be. Talk to us a little bit about, I guess, investment and what that experience was like, bringing on investors and how that's impacted the business's growth.
Yeah, it's been super unique and interesting in its own way. I think we're what I would call a tech-enabled service business. We're not a pure software company. We're not a pure service business. We're somewhere in the middle. We've got software automation that makes us more scalable than a service business, but we're by no means, Instagram, where you can put on a squillion users with the same kind of application and so on. So I think Australian venture capital is really geared towards pure software companies, and they want to see companies that can handle 3 times, 4 times, 5 times annual growth for multiple years in a row, and they want to see 95% gross margins in the business, and it kind of makes sense because those businesses, with the venture capital model, you bet on 30 companies and one goes bonkers.
A dime in a million,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, there's not that many of them. But I've met with all the venture capital firms in Australia, all super smart people. I learned a lot just by chatting to them. But I think our models was not quite the right fit for what they're after. So I realized pretty quickly that, and they were making this point in the meetings, that a business like ours is really requires less capital than a software company because we are less reliant on software, but we're less scalable. So but we're still pretty scalable. So finding the right investors was a bit of a challenge initially, but realized that it was more high net worth strategic type investors. We didn't need to raise heaps. We've raised, I think, a total of about $2 million, and we managed to do that just with a collection of smaller tickets from law firm partners, legal tech people, technology industry people, and people that understand the space. And they're great because they're not venture capital investors who you're one in of 30 that need to be a moonshot business. They provide strategic value, so they are able to be available if you want to call them, to answer legal questions or other questions about the business, and they are supportive and generally excited to be part of the journey. So the investors that we have are a great group, and and have really been supportive in helping the business grow. And we've only need to raise a couple of rounds of capital. So for them, it was just about demonstrating what the growth potential is of this business, that we really could scale it, and how we were going to be profitable. And I think our numbers, the model's pretty good. Like, the industry's a big one. I don't think we'd be, a lower risk investment than a lot of the moonshot tech companies. So, and as we've grown, it's just been easier and easier to raise capital. Yeah.
And I think you sort of touched on it too. Capital isn't always just capital. It's also some experience that comes into the business that can really help you fine tune your, I guess, toolbox as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, to then take the business to the next level, which I think is a fantastic way to bring on experience, not just bringing on capital. So I think it's a good thing. Mate, it's been fantastic to have you on the show to talk about the growth. Tell us a little bit about where SprintLaw is going in the future.
Look, I think my personal vision and ambition for the business has evolved a lot over the last 4 years and continues to evolve. But right now, it's all in a very positive place because we've had a very good year and there's a lot of positive signs. And I think, we mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned, but we launched in the UK like sort of recently, which has been a big step in our growth journey. I think, increasingly we're realizing that, we understand our segment, small businesses. We want to be the place that everyone in Australia thinks of when they go, I need small business legals. And we want to take that to the UK and a couple of other markets as well.
Nice.
We just want to own small business law if we can. And, that means the market size is actually very big, like a couple of million in Australia, small businesses, and even more over in the UK and Canada, some of the other markets we're looking at. So I think that means that this business could really be quite a big company. And if we can work out how to scale it, there's going to be people involved, so that's always a challenge. But if we can work out how to scale it, I think, I'd love to be 10 times bigger than we are now in the next 3 to 5 years. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. Yeah.
I think that's such an important point. You mentioned earlier that VC firms will say, hey, you don't need as much cash as a software business because you're not as scalable. But you're still damn scalable.
Yeah.
You've gone from 4 years, 2 founders, to then 35 people, and now branching into the UK and looking at different markets like the US and Canada. That is still pretty damn scalable. And the point I'm taking out of that is, everyone listening shouldn't take that as being, oh God, like my business is not scalable. Like a closed door from a VC firm, which no doubt when you walked in there, you would have thought, I need this cash and this is going to make us scale quickly. But your experience tells you otherwise. Like, you can definitely scale and scale quickly still.
Yeah. I mean, like, I could have, changed my forecast to say we're going to grow. At the moment I want to grow 2 times a year. If they want me to grow 3 to 4 times a year, like, I could have written that into my forecast. I don't want to run that business. That's a bad business for what we do. I want to grow very fast. I don't want to grow stupidly fast so that my team's miserable and everything sucks. So it's about working out, like how fast is right for your business. And for us, it was, I think around 2 times a year. And so that's how we think about it. And if the investors aren't on board with that, then it's no hard feelings. It's just not the right fit.
Yeah. Well, I guess joke's on them, really. As we sort of mentioned, the Deloitte Fast 500 said you grew by 3.6.
Well, that's true. Exactly. We say 2 times, but it's been a good couple of years. It's been more than that. So, yeah.
Yeah, mate. Awesome to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Do you want to plug, SprintLaw? Where can people find you, socials and the like?
Yeah, for sure. If our Google ads are working, just type in SprintLaw into Google and we'll come up, and you can check us out if you're a small business or a startup that needs legal advice. We are hopefully the best sort of service provider that you'll be able to find. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, and appreciate you guys listening in. That's Alex Solo. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, mate.
Socius, thank you for joining us today. Please hit the subscribe button if you've enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to be part of the Socius community, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay in touch. Cheers.